The big time stuff that I wish I had. The big time stuff that'll make you mad. The big time stuff. Big time stuff. I like the big time stuff. Big time stuff. I like the big time stuff that I never had.
Today I'm pleased to bring you Dr. Jeff Spencer. Jeff Spencer is a former chiropractor for the U.S. cycling team. So yes, he got a chance to actually work with Lance Armstrong and all of the rest of the folks we've read there. And he's a former gold Olympic medal winner. In addition to that, today he runs a very successful coaching practice, lives in Pasadena, and has quite a bit of insight about what it takes to be a champion in this world. I hope you'll enjoy Jeff Spencer on today's Market Meditations. So look, I wanted to bring Jeff to hang out with us today on the podcast because I had I've had maybe 3 conversations with him now, maybe a few when we first met, and then a couple recently, and it struck me on just how much more I still needed to learn about being great, and obviously it's a journey, and you got to keep focusing on it. But I thought, why not bring, an Olympic medal winner and, just in general, a coach in the realm of, I think he's built a blueprint for champions and coached, 30 gold medal winners, Jeff?
I don't know. Probably they're over 40, I think. Then I stopped counting. So
you've got proof of concept.
Jeff, do you mind just sharing? Actually, let's go about this differently. Chris, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself first? Because both of you know me pretty well. Why don't you share just a little bit about what you do for your day job, and then I'll share just a little bit, and then we'll let Jeff jump in. How's that?
Oh gosh, well, my story is fairly straightforward. Like many people, I became very interested in investing in business as a young person. Had many jobs, paper routes. I even in Louisiana sold turtles. I would get them from
I did not know this.
My grandfather had a shrimping boat, and he had these big butterfly nets, and they would catch things other than shrimp. Eels and things that weren't very.
Is this your grandfather, the doctor?
No, my mom's
okay.
dad. Yeah, he
your
was.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a brick mason, and he did a lot of stuff. He was a kind of polymath in a very hands-on way. But he had a shrimp boat, and he was a outdoorsman, hunter as well. But in shrimp season, he would, save the turtles that he would catch in his net for me, and I'd take them to school, and the snapping turtles, which were the meanest ones, garnered the highest price. They were
That's funny.
Very, yeah. So anyway, that kind of started me off when I realized
turtle trading is where it starts.
Yeah, turtle arbitrage, right?
Well, the arbitrage is 100% no matter what. You didn't have to pay for them. So.
Well, that's true. But some kids would give me box turtles in exchange for snapping turtles. It's like 4 to 1. Yeah, 4 box turtles for 1 snapping turtle.
That's so funny.
That was very interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I became interested in investing, and that took me a long way. And during some time, my father was a pediatrician. I'd work in his office, and certain professions have a target on their back for Wall Street salespeople, and physicians with an MD degree do as well. So he'd regularly get calls from wirehouses and brokers, and he started deferring for me to pick those calls up in the office. And most of them were shameless promoters. So early on, I figured there must be a better way to deliver real financial advice to real people. And that sort of started me on this journey. And through learning more about investing and great investors, I, not trying to emulate them, but trying to seek what they sought, have come to my own levels of success and frustration, but and success and learning, and that has been an ongoing journey. So, and here I have a registered investment advisory firm in Pasadena. We
fantastic.
serve. Yeah. We've been in business now as an independent firm 10 years. I'd worked for a few different larger firms before, starting out on our own. So I have a business partner, and we are very lucky to be here in Southern California and in Pasadena in particular.
Good for you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, Jeff, I know you've been in, 9 Tour de France's?
Yeah, I did 9 Tour de France. Yeah.
9 tours.
Jeff, you got to share. I mean, and like, I know there's a lot, but like, that's one of the interesting things that I didn't know it's quite 9. I keep learning more and more about all the cool things you've done. So it's okay if we take a few minutes to talk about it. I don't really see it as bragging as much as just kind of sharing all the cool things and us getting a chance to, choose one of those to dive in off of.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess one memorable thing is that my first cycling championship when I was 13, it was back in New York, and I traveled there from California, and I won every race in the national championship, and I got the silver medal. And so that was just an amazing experience. So obviously you can see that something's wrong with the math there, right? Mm-hmm. So I got disqualified in one race because there was a crash, and the head judge disqualified me that enabled his nephew to win the national championship. So that was my first brush with, should we say, some challenging aspects of playing a high stakes game. Mm-hmm. So I guess another highlight, for sure, was having 2 very creative parents. My father was an artistic genius, literally, but he died homeless. I found out 30 years later after seeing him for the last time when I was 13. And that taught me a very valuable lesson that will and talent aren't enough. There's something, but they're not enough. They're not what makes the difference. There's something else that does. And I was fortunate to have 2 really important mentors in my life that were angels put into my life at critical times. My first one was my cycling coach at 13, and he was a 5-time national champion, 3-time Olympian, and he taught me how to win, which is quite interesting. He said, you need to be a great human being first and an athlete second, and you need to know the art of winning more than just trying harder. And he shared with me how to do that, and that was invaluable. And then my second mentor I met when I was 18, and he was 76, and he chose me to be his apprentice to the glass masterpieces that he was creating, literally. And during the breaks of my apprenticeship to him, he would read me poetry, he would read me philosophy, he would play classical music to me, he would talk to me about the great novels of history. And he said, I need to fill you up on this stuff. And I had the ability to absorb that. So we had this kind of unusual composite starting to form. I was very artistic. I was apprenticing to a glass master while I was training to become an Olympian.
When I hear glassmaster, I think Chihuly. Is that the kind of stuff you were doing?
Yeah. I actually showed at the same level as Dale. So my work was comparable to his, but it wasn't on that scale. I was a one-man band, so to speak. So to say the quality of work that I did in my genre, his was the same. So we showed at the same national shows together. And I was also a student at the University of Southern California where I was studying sports science. So there was this interesting composite that was taking place. And the sum total of that is that I had a unique perspective about the whole world of human performance. And the athletes wanted to win gold medals, and the professional athletes wanted to make millions. And they thought that I could help them because I was an Olympian and I knew the art and the science of creating personal greatness. And the business people knew that they had to become their own champions, that they were going to be successful in business. So they both sought out my experience to help craft them into becoming their own champions, which I did. But there was another twist to this, is that the athletes wanted to extend their careers. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you don't get injured or you get back quickly. And then the business people said to me, well, look, just between you and I, my same age counterparts in their early 40s are all dropping dead of heart attacks. I kind of don't want to do that. Can you help me avoid that? So I said, yeah, I'll go back to school and which I did. And I got my chiropractic licensure in wellness care and acute trauma, which allowed me to then be a primary healthcare provider to work with my clients, not only in terms of crafting their mindsets and their abilities to produce greatness consistently, but to also stay in the game long enough to amass a legacy that truly represented their capacity. So that was another kind of blessing side to it. And the composite of those experiences is that I became a bit of a master in the whole, meaning that I can understand what it takes to craft greatness in all of its nuanced requirements. And in working with people, rather than having 10 experts, they could have me look at the totality of their life experience, where they've been, where they are, how they think, what that means. And then we could craft a path forward, the smoothest path forward, to consistently and repeatedly achieve their most important goals. So that's kind of what the path was. And that ability allowed me to be shuttled around on Richard Branson's island by him and his private golf cart, there being of service to him and others, and being, at Tiger Woods, advising him on a variety of different things, being with Lance at all 7 of his Tour de France victories. And so it's really led to a very rich and expansive experience advising some of the most prolific achievers of our era on how to get to the top and how to stay there. So that's the Cliff Notes version of kind of where I've been. And I would just finally say that my crowning achievement, though, was the adoption of our daughter about 10 and a half years ago from Colombia at the age of 10, which is a very unusual adoption because most people consider older kids to be damaged goods, so they don't adopt them. And we did. And I can honestly say that it's the hardest thing I've ever done, 1,000 times harder than becoming an Olympian, but also the most rewarding. And though my wife cried every day for 9 years and 9 months, it was so difficult. About a year and a half, she stopped crying. And right now I'm proud to say that my daughter, despite not speaking English when we adopted her and we not speaking Spanish and her not having any school and PTSD and ADHD from severe physical and mental cruelty for her first 10 years, she just completed her junior year in college. So again, that's the experience, that's the path. And, here I am now.
Jeff, thank you. That's
you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
a great story. I hear you often talk about honor and honoring our best selves,
Yes.
and that we have a moral obligation, really, to use our talents to the highest level we can.
I do believe that.
I know that's a very deeply felt belief and that you hold. Is that sort of the core? I mean, I've started many projects and had many goals, which I've given up on. I think you talked about some of the great athletes you've helped to coach along the way, including being there with Lance Armstrong and Tiger Woods. And is this something you see in those people as well? Is this sort of the core that allows you to function and move higher and higher along this path without throwing in the towel?
Well, I think people have different motivations as to why they pursue certain goals. But, for me, there has to be an honorable pursuit, meaning that, first off, to build our God-given assets that we have and our skill level to be able to showcase and honor those gifts. I feel that that's part of why we're here on this planet, knowing that there's only one of us in all of creation. There's not going to be another Chris or another Neal or another Jeff, and we all have a unique capacity to create a life of distinction and value, but also of contribution. And also why that's important is that when we produce excellence, it's not only honoring the privilege, but it's also showcasing to others that living a life of value and quality and connection is possible. And in today's world, we're having less and less evidence of that. And when we execute that and we do that and people can see it, then it keeps them in belief that they can also be a manifestor of their potential and live a life of tranquility of being as a result of honoring that, and also developing the skills to be confident that they can choose the right goals and that they can manifest those things that they're called to manifest. And as I told my daughter, ever since we adopted her and she didn't even speak English, every time she left the door to go to school, I said, don't be average. And I said that to her because I wanted her neurology to get used to something that would have greater meaning to her later, knowing that nobody in her family ever graduated from junior high school, let alone having aspirations of any higher levels of achievement. And that's the way I feel about everybody. You know, as being an Olympian, I really experienced what it was like to play at my full potential athletically. And even though I don't really work in the athletic world now, it's all in business. To me, it's the same thing. When you know you're coming from your highest self, you know that you're, again, transforming all those that you're in the presence of by, again, demonstrating a commitment to something of significance and value. And, when I was dying from mercury poisoning about 20 years ago, I realized that the only thing I was going to take with me is what I gave others. And the only thing I was going to be remembered by is what I did give them. And to just go back to my daughter here for a second, is that if you don't think what you do and what you say matters, just adopt a kid, because they hang on your every word, especially when they've never been hugged and never been loved. And what I've learned from that is that we have to make a conscious decision every day about how we're going to show up for people, because how we show up does matter. And had people showed up for my daughter differently, she wouldn't have the severe trauma that she didn't ask for. She would not have been exposed to that. And she wouldn't have the challenge of having to address that in addition just to the normal difficulties that we all had just by being alive and creating
by being
lives.
adolescents. Yeah.
That's what I mean. So I do believe very strongly in that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Jeff, you mentioned something that's pretty interesting to me. You mentioned, the right goal, having the right goal. How does one know if their goals are the right goals?
There's all sorts of different types of goals. There's big, hairy, audacious goals. There are moonshots. There are small goals. There are aspirational goals. There are stretch goals. There are smart goals. But in the high performance world of sports, business, and entertainment, it's essential to have the right goal, because when we have the right goal, we have an alignment of mind, body, and soul. And when we have that, we have a very special type of focus that I call GOCUS, that allows us to hyper-focus on stuff in front of us and get things done, while simultaneously having a peripheral awareness of better options occurring in our periphery that could take us to a bigger goal faster, that we could never have conceived of if we're hyper-focused. And it also allows us to see blind sides forming that can unnecessarily take us out of the game. And that's why right goals are important, so much so that I've actually created a criteria that we can challenge goals that we're aspiring to against, to make sure that we have the right goal. Every letter in the word right stands for something. The R in right is relevant. How relevant is the goal that we're pursuing? The I is indicators. What are the indicators that this is the right goal in terms of value to us, impact on others, impact on our legacy, impact on our finances, impact on our discretionary time. The G stands for gravity. Are we, and have we been called to this goal, or is it just something we're pursuing for self-interest reasons? The H in right stands for height. Does this goal that I'm pursuing have enough altitude and value to it to resonate with who I am, to call me to a bigger game? And then the T in right stands for time. Is it the right time to pursue the goal? Do we have time to pursue the goal? And is the time to goal completion acceptable to us? And I honestly do feel, Chris, is that people have a very casual relationship to their goals. And I feel that because they're casual, they don't quite have the intimacy and conviction and persistence to do what it takes to get through the difficult periods of any goal that you will encounter that's aspirational. So much so that in addition to the right goal, I've actually created an entire model on how it is from goal inception to goal completion. We prepare ourselves to systematically get from start to finish in the least difficult way possible. So that's why, to me, right goals are essential.
Well, so without trying to oversimplify it, because it sounds like you take a lot of things into consideration with thinking about a goal. I still don't know how I even describe to my mom after today whether she's got the next right goal or not.
Well, if you had the right goal criteria, you could have her tell you the answer as to why this goal is relevant. And if she can't defend its relevance, or she can't tell you the indicators and the value that it brings to her, or she can't tell you the gravity or magnetism between her and it, if she can't tell you that it's a big enough goal to excite her mind, body, and soul, if she can't tell you that it's the right time, or if she has the time to do it, or whether or not the time to completion is acceptable, then I'm not sure that you really want to necessarily start the goal, because you're not going to have a lot of assurance that you can actually get to where you want to go. And to Chris's point, if people had spent the time to look at it, then they may not talk themselves out of or even begin to pursue goals in the first place that they find themselves ultimately abandoning. So again, I feel that it's a responsible action to take just to ensure that you're not trying to talk yourself into something that you may eventually abandoning because we didn't take the time to vet it correctly. And only your mother can answer that question. We don't have your mother's answer, but we can certainly expose her to a line of questioning that would allow her with more certainty to confirm to you, yes, Neal, this is the right goal. I saw that I was just guessing at this, and what I was thinking it would be isn't it at all. I'm glad that you took the time to make me take another look at this. Or, hey, thank you, Neal. This fortifies my belief and conviction from thinking it's the right goal. I know it's now the right goal without any reasonable doubt.
Jeff, you've mentioned or talked about in the past, and you even sort of gave the comment here that most people fail or give up on goals because they take them too lightly. And you've talked about having an intimate relationship with a goal. And is that intimate relationship with a goal something that happens naturally when it's the right goal? Is it something you still must cultivate? If you have clarity and that goal's aligned with your mind, body, and soul, is it something that naturally occurs, that you just have a deeper sense with it, a more intimate relationship?
Well, I think you will have an intimate relationship with it, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be challenged by it in circumstances. I mean, there are many points along the road for me to becoming an Olympian, the 10 years that I devoted to it, where I knew I could do it, but there were moments of doubt, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't give us a free pass on the human experience, but it does allow us to default back to and ask ourselves the question about our core belief. And if we have a structure to hold the goal in that can help us stay connected to the truth of what it is, then it becomes a lot easier to push through the difficult moments. But if we have a casual relationship with it, then the doubts that we have can amplify upon themselves to a point where we could talk ourselves out of it just before the breakthrough that we've been waiting for. And I see this all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you still set a number of goals for yourself regularly?
I have a variety of different goals. There's the grunt work goals, taking the trash out and doing the basic task of life.
We all have those.
Can't these just go away? Mm-hmm. But, I do. And I feel what's important is that we choose goals that are within our reach, that are necessary for us to gain the skills to aspire to more lofty goals. I feel that we need to set for ourselves some goals that we may think are difficult to achieve, if not impossible. to test ourselves against our presumption, but they shouldn't be of high consequence where we're putting too much at risk in terms of time, resources, et cetera. But they could be aspirational enough for us to develop another level of confidence in ourselves by doing something that we hadn't done before. And I think, quite honestly, all of us do suffer a certain amount of confidence uncertainty at certain moments in our lives that we need to challenge. And we need to find ways beyond it to continue to develop skills that we can rely on, that we know that are there for us to help us move forward in situations that may be difficult. I just feel that that's, again, part of the honor ritual of life, is stepping into things of that magnitude, because as much as we think that we want an easy life, we really don't, because the mind, body, and soul deplore sameness, and they kind of beg for novelty. They beg for challenge. And when we are continually in pursuit reasonably with enough average goals and appropriate lofty goals that cause us to reach, I think that keeps us engaged. It keeps us vital. It keeps us on purpose. It gives us hope in a bigger future. It gives us confidence in our skills. It showcases to our family and to our kids what's possible. It creates trust with us and peers. There's a lot of reasons for doing that.
Jeff, you mentioned that, that you had two mentors, and I think, of course, you'll agree there's a third, your adopted daughter.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Well said, Chris.
The things you mentioned about how that was one of, if not the toughest program you subscribed yourself to. I'd like to ask, what was the difference between, you're an Olympian, and certainly there's no easy path to climb that mountain. And of course, you're beset with doubts along the way. In this case, when you adopted your daughter, the severity of those challenges you mentioned felt greater, and yet you still persevered. What were those qualitative differences, and how were you challenged in parenting in ways you weren't as an athlete?
Parenting as an athlete, I was left alone with my own accountability. I was responsible for a 10-year investment in the possibility, and my odds were 186 million to 1 that I could become an Olympian. And if I didn't, I was still accountable for those 10 years, but I was really only accountable to myself in a sense. But when I was 58 at the time we adopted our daughter, who was 10. Most people thought I was crazy. Why would I want to do that? When I was at the height of my career, making a lot of money, in the limelight. But, the Olympian in me, you take your cues from different places. And for me, I want to be known as the guy that when you're called into duty and you're called to service and you get the calling, you show up and you get the job done. That's what the Olympics was. It's like, I didn't choose it chose me. And I showed up and I did what had to get done to honor that opportunity, and it worked out well. And this was the same, gravity, that it was a calling that was completely understood for what it was. But when you're dealing with a wife that cries every day, just imagine going to work and having to perform your duties, and you come home and your wife is sitting there in the bed crying her eyes out every day for 9 years and 9 months because it's so difficult. The lying, the cheating, the deceit. My daughter was raised as a criminal. You do whatever you got to do to survive. You lie, you cheat, whatever. You don't want to be the person left standing when musical chairs goes off. But I want to say something here is that I knew that my daughter didn't ask to be raised like that. That was something that was imposed upon her. So I didn't really look at that as really her. It was something that she would have to grow out of, but she couldn't grow out of it by herself. That was my job as her father, to nurture her along to break the chains of her past that would be impossible for her to break herself. And, being an Olympian, you don't really think about winning a bronze medal. you think about gold, and if you win bronze, you're grateful for that, but you don't go in with the idea of winning a bronze. And it's like we adopted our daughter into our life and into our world, and it was our job to finish the job, because that's what you do. You make a deal, you finish the job. And so, I was used to working with very talented, very precocious people, crafting out their genius and brilliance to become iconic. And so my daughter met her match in me, because I was used to dealing with talented people that were quirky. And because of my commitment to her, and it was not difficult for me to stay in the game. So it went something like this, is that when I realized that we have a daughter here in the US that speaks no English and we didn't speak Spanish, she has no school and she's 10. She has severe PTSD and ADHD from the severe mental and physical abuse. She has a parasitic-ridden body. She's almost lost her permanent teeth. She has every risk factor known to humanity. It's a 20 on a scale of 1, that this is going to be formidable. So what I did, first, there was no choice in my decision, because there are moments in time where you either step into that's part of what it is, that you did kind of ask for, that you don't step away from. So I immediately that day, I cut my work schedule by 90%. 90% of my income was gone in one day because of what I had to do to raise my daughter. So what I learned from doing this is that I learned several things. I learned, number one, you could love anybody. You don't need a special reason to do it. You just show up and you do it. The second thing I learned is that you have to have implicit trust in the process, because my wife and I and her were on survival every day for 9 3/4 years. Just getting through a day was its own miracle. That there has to be an explicit trust in process, where you're not going to hold something out for what you think that you may need later. Whatever you got to do right now to get through now is what you do. So what it does, it takes your reliance on, whatever you have stuck away in the safe deposit box. You don't think of that as a plan B. You step into whatever it is, it has to go right. And there's an implicit trust that everything's going to work out. And if it doesn't, that's the way it goes. You still have to do what you have to do. I also learned that my constitution is I don't barter for what I'm going to get for what I do. It's like, I'm not going to be a half dad to get what I think that I should get. It's like, I'm going to be a full dad. And if I don't get anything in return, that's okay, because that's not what the bargain was for. So no bartering, on that one. And I learned that you can do anything on behalf of someone, but where energy consumption is in scarce supply is that when everything you do is about your own self-interest and for your own advantage, that's where energy becomes fragile. I always had enough energy to do whatever was necessary on behalf of my daughter. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, because it taught me, I wouldn't say a Spartan lifestyle, because I was already living that, but just to say again, I've learned through that there's always a best path forward. You can love anybody. The other thing I'll say about this, and this is really important just in a business context, is that, there's going to be tough moments and difficult moments. And when you're in those difficult moments, you can't forget who you are at a core fundamental level. And there are times in any business where things go south, where you start to question yourself and doubt yourself and face the embarrassment of facing others, maybe even reading about yourself in the newspaper. That's difficult. But when you have something that's so sustained, it's so difficult, you learn that a place that you have to go to is to remember who you are and what you stand for and what you're capable of. And on the other side of that, you come out equal to or better than you were than you went into it, because you kind of really honored who you knew yourself to be and you came from that place. And that's why that was such a valuable experience to me. Certainly one of the reasons why I'm so successful working with my clients, because that experience matched with the Olympics, matched with the Tour de France, matched with all the other stuff that I've done, is given me a 360-degree view of what life really is. And with that, being able to craft the fastest path, smoothest path forward to get to where we want to go. And, now that I'm 69, I don't know what that's supposed to look or feel like, but I feel like some of my best work is in front of me.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. That's beautiful. I mean,
thank you.
The deep well of compassion,
Yeah.
and the recognition that in the Buddhist teachings, they say that there are certain unlimited characteristics, Maha-Maitri, the unlimited capacity we have to love.
For sure.
That there's no limit to how much you can cultivate and grow.
That's true. So true.
In that space.
So true.
Yeah, and it certainly seems that you've in your early mentorship had this recognition. I talked a little bit about the honor before, but also that great compassion that you had in recognizing and really understanding, which comes from true love, what your daughter had gone through and why she showed up the way she did.
Yeah,
I'm certain that's a tendency that helps you tremendously with your clients.
it does. I mean, it's its own gift. Another thing I learned from this, Chris, is that there's an essential rite of passage that everybody has to go through. That's difficult, and it's not something that you can get over in a week or two. But there's something deeper in all of us that begs to get out. That's our best work, and is also of our best service to others. But if a life is too good, you're never going to ask a set of questions that will take you to a space where you even start to contemplate options to the way that you're living or what you're faced with. And I would just say that, again, when life is too good, it's impossible to ask a set of questions that's necessary to connect with the deepest part of us that can be our greatest contribution, because there's no reason to even begin to ask those questions because we're too busy thinking about our next car, our next vacation, or whatever. There you have it.
So you're saying it's harder to have bigger aspirations if you're the son of a billionaire.
Yeah.
That's interesting. One of our former guests, Steve Reed, was telling me the worst thing you can do is leave lots of money to your children, because it might ruin their drive.
Yeah, totally. I believe that. It's interesting you say that, Neal, because when we adopted our daughter, I said to her when she could barely speak English, I said, there's three things I want you to know, is that you're always going to have enough to eat. Because, there were moments that she confided in me that she had terrible hunger pains from starvation. And what she did, she used to pull gum off the bottom of seats and chew the gum that people had stuck there. And there were times when she actually, pulled the gum off of streets, gritty streets of rural Colombia, and chewed the gum to stave off the hunger pains. And so I said that to her because I didn't want her to worry. Her abdomen was distended from the parasitic-ridden body that she had at the time. And I said, I'm never going to let you down, because her family, her culture, her country let her down, and she had no anchor, and I needed to tell her that I would be that anchor. She may not believe me, but she would find out in time that was true. And then the third thing I told her, I said, even though you've had a tough life, kid, if anybody deserves a break, it's you, but you got to earn your place on the team. So no free gifts, no free passes. And so even today, she works 2 jobs. She's just completed her schoolwork recently here last week, finishing up the semester. So we've always stayed very vigilant about making sure that she remains grounded in self-sufficiency, and that she be continually, reminded of the blessing of what we share as a family, because she is a master manipulator. I mean, that's raised as a criminal.
You have to be on the street.
That's what you do, man.
Survive. I imagine, yeah.
So, the point I wanted to speak to is what you so appropriately said, that, we had to kind of protect her from her own genius of shortcutting everything at the expense of relationships, and her connecting with her true genius and being able to come from that place as she's beginning to manifest.
Interesting. Very loving approach. I guess that's all we really all need in life, and you're able to explain to her that you were going to give those things to her, and then you were showing love. I think the other important part.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
well, thank you. It's amazingly how easy it is when you're doing it on behalf of someone else, and I think about kids. There's, quite honestly, things I do for my daughter that I wouldn't even do for myself. That she's imposed and awakened me to, that I kind of needed to see and needed to hear. So I, as Chris said, I owe her an eternal debt of gratitude, and for the opportunity to self-reflect and raise my game in the process of raising her. I feel truly like we're the lucky ones.
I wonder if we switch gears a little bit. I'd love to hear the story a little bit about how you ended up as the team doc for, all the Tour de France.
Yeah, great. So I helped a cyclist win a gold medal, the first person I helped win a gold medal in 1984. And he was a cyclist, and he was very well aware of my skill in terms of crafting a body and a mind that were capable of peak performance consistently and predictably and repeatedly. And one of his ambitions was to create a winning Tour de France team. And he and I, we didn't completely lose contact with each other, but we were both pursuing our own lives independently after that gold medal in '84. And we reacquainted later in the mid-'90s when he actually did have a team. And we had talked at that time about having me come on and bringing kind of my dimension to the team that was not currently in professional cycling. And we eventually were able to make that happen. And it was when Lance came back from cancer. And, he was an unknown commodity after the cancer. And that's how I got brought onto the team. And my job description, they had several medical doctors, so it wasn't really in the medical doctor side of things, but it was really in creating the recovery processes and mending the bodies and the minds every day after the brutal stages at the Tour de France. And that's how I got involved in it. And, trust me, Lance does not have anybody on the team just because he likes them. You got to prove your merit. And I was one of 3 people that did all 7 of Lance's tours with him, and some of the most important experiences of all, because I've always considered the Tour de France to be the ultimate life clinic because it's so difficult. You're racing 6 hours a day in blistering heat, freezing snow, rain or shine. You put on your clothes and you go to work, and you're consuming 10,000 calories a day, and you're still losing weight. You may climb 30,000 vertical feet in a day, which is the height of a pilot of a 747. Wow. Injured or sick, you get up and you go to work, and it's horrific because the severe strain that it puts on the mind and body. And kind of really the saving grace of that for me is that I always felt it was the ultimate life clinic, because you're going to experience in 21 days everything that you're going to experience in life, but you have to find a right way to engage and surpass it. If it's a liability, you don't have the luxury of going home and sleeping it off or not getting it right for your teammates. I felt really fortunate, and that was another area that I did, 9 tours over 13 years that really crafted, my mind and my capability to be able to help prolific achievers grow into their talent and manifest legacies that they were capable of because of what I learned and what I contributed at those tours.
Did you read poetry to the Tour de France team like your 76-year-old mentor?
Well, I did speak softly when I needed to. Touche, Chris. That was perfect, man. Chris 1, Spencer 0.
But
That's hilarious.
In listening to you, Jeff, I did think, in all of the training that all of us who are attempting at high achievement go through, all the snippets we gather. Are there any consistencies that you see among these high performers that are really almost always on display? I mean, for example, once read that, there was a study across many high performers, especially in individual sports and small team sports. So they looked at, Michael Jordan in the NBA and Andre Agassi and Tiger Woods. And one of the things that I remember reading very vividly is the self-talk of these top performing athletes. It was always very encouraging. Like in speaking to themselves, if he missed a free throw, Michael would say, "Come on, Michael, you can do better." Like he was speaking to a teammate in a very supportive fashion. Are there any things like that you saw across the board that really gave you an idea of this is a facet of all the high performers?
Well, there are certain things that we can say that are absolutely predictive of someone that can stay in the game long enough to evolve their highest capacity, but also take that capacity and ride that wave for as long as possible. And the first thing is the champion's golden rule is you do the homework and the test is easy. Meaning that, so it's self-evident, right?
Which they taught me that in junior high.
Yeah, exactly.
It took me a while to learn that lesson.
So, again, if you're well prepared, you trust your preparation, you let that do the performance for you. And it's ultimately all about preparation. And again, the people that prepare well are the ones that are confident, and they're the ones that trust in their preparation to execute and win the gold medal for them. That's certainly also the idea of a team. No one wins alone, for sure. Mm-hmm. And there has to be a team that can do for us what we can't do for ourselves. But the collective capacity of the team allows the exponential to happen beyond the sum of the parts. So team plays an absolutely essential role in that. Also, pacing. Don't try to expect too much of yourself too soon, because if you do, you're going to talk yourself out of a great career. It takes time to evolve yourself to a point where you can play at your potential, and you don't want to blow yourself up before you get there, because if you do, then you're not going to be able to create your best legacy. And I see that all the time. People too much, too hard, way too fast. That's for sure. And that does fit into the mindset. The true champions, they know that they can only achieve what they have the skill and the planning and the execution to be able to achieve. You can't take yourself to a place that you can't get to unless you prepared well and you have the assets and the skills to make it happen. And they're very clear on that.
Is that, Jeff, then a sense that your circle of competence becomes much clearer to you as you develop and prepare?
Yes, and you can actually compress that learning curve by advisory. And that's like what I do for my clients. Only I know where they are, and I know what that means. I know what we need to do to move forward. And so in that, we can have conversations about what they need to do now to maximize what they're going to need for now and for later. Like I was talking with someone yesterday, I said, well, you can either take 20 years to do that if you want to do it yourself and challenge your assumptions against reality, or we can work together and I can show you how to shortcut that and maybe get it done in 2, because I can show you what history tells us about where you are and what's coming, and we can avoid the preventable problems and take the smoothest path to the victory circle. So again, the answer to that would be yes. So having the right advisors that can advise us correctly in specific areas to shortcut our learning and develop our confidence and our capacity is an absolute necessity.
Jeff, one of the things I actually listen quite a bit to the Michael Gervais Finding Mastery podcast. I don't know if you've
it's a great one. He's a great guy.
I quite enjoy it. And there was an episode with Toto Wolff, the head of the F1 Mercedes team. And, he starts the episode or podcast by saying high performers, all the high performers he'd met generally had something go wrong in their past in a major way in order to be high performers. And a psychologist friend of mine actually recently got a chance to ask him about that. And he said, I actually still don't know where to put that, or, how to completely frame a conversation about that. But is that a trend you tend to agree with? And can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks. So I think first and foremost, a characteristic of this is that many people don't come from privilege. They've had things not done for them, but they've had to learn to be resourceful and accountable to themselves and have the self-start gene. And I think a lot of that is where we find ourselves in early development cultivates a certain side of that, where we developed our street smarts, should I say, in our resourcefulness. If somebody isn't there to always save us and do everything for us, or to try to monitor us too much. So yeah, I would say that there's something to that, but also what you're fighting for. You're fighting to take yourself to a place beyond where you currently are that may not be who you are, but you may not have asked for it, but you do have an option and an alternative to move yourself beyond it. So I would say that that's one characteristic that does seem to be present. I would say that having some level of difficulty also allows you to place a value on things that you took for granted. Until things are taken away from us, we can't exactly do that. Therefore, a certain level of challenge, as you described there, Neal, I think is an essential ingredient, because it places a value on things, but it also clearly showcases is that at the end of the day, we're the ones that turn the pedals to our own bicycle, and it's going to be up to us to be able to lead the charge towards our bigger future. And if you need help getting motivated, then you better look and do something else. If, simply put, so what he's saying is correct. And I interesting you say this, because I had this conversation with this guy today in New York City. And, we were discussing the merits of effort. And, my points, he was a PR executive in New York City. And I was telling him that, unless you have the self-start gene, it's impossible for you to become what you can be, because you don't trust yourself enough in your abilities, and probably rightly so, because you probably don't have what you need to be able to make that happen. And that's why I think it's a lot better to have it a bit harder earlier in life to figure it out, so you do have an appreciation coming into it and you have a reference for value. And you'll also fight for your bigger future when you have a sense of what it's like to live without excessively. And what I was saying to the executive, I said that literally billions of dollars are spent a year on talent where there's been no vetting of the talent. Let's say a business spends, let's take a lawyer. A law firm is going to spend $1 million over the 5 years to cultivate a lawyer into a point where they start making money for the firm. But what guarantee do you have that person can actually do that? A Harvard pedigree is not a guarantee of that. There's got to be something outside of that we can look at, and we can confirm that they have what it takes to reduce the risk on that. And it's exactly the same thing in sports. I'll bet you there's easily $1 billion a year spent or actually wasted on talent that can't possibly manifest itself because the vetting of the athletes as humans and how they think has not been thoroughly enough done. So again, this does come back to what you were saying there, Neal, is that are there certain indicators that we should look at to take it of as being real? And I'm saying, yes, there are. Are they being done? I don't see the evidence that they're being done with the level of scrutiny that they should be done to protect one's investment.
Jeff, as part of your work, do you build a process or help executives think through that as they're evaluating talent?
100%, because to me, if you hear a person talking like this, you can actually guarantee how they're going to solve problems. So for me, like in that space, executive performance is one of my specialties. And the conversations that I have with the CEOs that I work with is very directly about that. Had that conversation yesterday. Person's got actually an investment firm in Vancouver, BC, and we were talking about this very thing. And I said to him, well, because you're telling me this, that means that this person will make a decision in this way. That means that in X amount of time, you will have difficulty with this because they don't have what it takes to address this when it surfaces later. So you have to challenge this now to make sure that you have a contingency for it, or that you adjust and adapt up and through it to limit your risk and your liability. So that's what I do really well. And I do that because I've been so many places in my career. And, being older, I've been through a complete pass in life. And unless you've been through a complete pass of life, then you can't really understand what all the variables are. So there's still a certain amount of guessing and presumption about what you think it to be as being it.
Yeah.
And so if you want to play roulette, go ahead. The answer is yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating conversation. We really, I don't know, Chris, if you have any more questions today, I'm sure we could talk to Jeff,
No,
for 6 or 7 hours.
I feel like we're just getting started, you guys. It's just been wonderful. Wonderful.
It's such a deep well of knowledge that you carry, and a lot of great information, Jeff. And of course, I'm deeply honored to have had you share with us what you know and what you've experienced and what you see out in the world. I really do appreciate it.
Well, that comes through loud and clear, Chris. The questions and just the line of conversation has been just absolutely extraordinary. And, thank you so much for having trust in me and in my journey to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned. And if I could just kind of sign off by saying one thing here is that, there's only one of us in all of creation. And I think about that, and there's 7 billion people on this planet right now, and there's only one Chris, there's only one Jeff, there's only one Neal. That allows us to look at life in our own unique and distinct way that nobody else does. And I would just encourage everybody to be mindful of that unique opportunity and to spend the time to cultivate and grow and acquire the necessary talents and environment that will allow us to, in a profound way, live a life showcasing that in aspiring to goals that we're called to. And there's always room at the top for the best, and we kind of decide what that is. And just would ask everybody to just, really cherish your uniqueness and cultivate that and showcase that out without apology to humanity.
Without apology.
That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey, Jeff,
Thank you,
before
Neal.
you go, before you go, where can people find you?
Oh, thanks. There are a couple of ways here. You could certainly, actually, I have a PDF that people may be interested in. It's called How Not to Blow It Just Before You Win. Just please get this and read it before you need it. And you could get that by going to drjeffspencer.com, like drjeffspencer.com/1, drjeffspencer.com/1, like the number one, and you'll get that PDF. If you'd like to reach out to me personally, would love to hear from you. You can send me an email at jeff@drjeffspencer.com. Thank you so much, everybody. Love you to pieces.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
See you, everybody.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.
Incredible.
Yeah.
This may sound really odd. I don't know if I've told you this, Chris. I learned a lot about investing from my tangerine tree.
Ah. And,
I think that's a book.
and what did your?
Neal,
Yeah, there's a good
a
book
book.
for even for
book.
children.
That's a book.
Yeah, I guess I can summarize it this way. Like I went through phases where I just wanted to pick all the tangerines all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that enjoying the tangerine a little earlier in the season when it's still a little tart is nice, and throughout its entire maturity until, it's just starting not quite to shriveling, but right there. And I enjoyed the tangerines more with the, palette of flavors or rainbow of flavors, however you want to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about, how and then, at the same time, I thought about liquidity a little bit in my first company. And, I thought like actually one of the very best things to do is to, be able to enjoy the beginning, middle, and end of just things in general. Rather than rush to pick all of the tangerines on the first day or on a Sunday or something.
Mm-hmm.
Thich Nhat Hanh does a whole Dharma talk on eating a tangerine in mindfulness. So he encourages you to, even in peeling the tangerine gracefully and eating it just one section at a time.
That's like how do you do that with peanut M&Ms?
Yeah, there are many things I guess we could make a corollary of this with.